So thanks for coming. I know it's Friday, and it seems like everybody I was talking to was not going to be here on Friday, so I'm glad that there's actually people sitting out there. That's pretty cool. So my name is Eddie Canales, and I'm going to be a senior software engineer at Crosschecks in 2 weeks. So it's a little bit complicated to tell you what I'm doing right now, but this talk is not about Crosschecks, it's about a different company, a previous company. But I'm excited about my new gig coming up. So I'm here to tell you a story, and my story starts about 2 years ago. And so what happened about 2 years ago was that we were in a position with our company that we needed to sort of pause product development for the most part, and we wanted to sort of rethink where we were going and re-strategize. So what that meant for the tech team is that we had the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to say, let's make things in the tech actually better. Right? So we had gone through many years of incremental improvements and trying our best to get better, but we were sort of straddled with the technologies that we had. So this was an amazing opportunity for us. So I'll start by telling you what our starting point was so that you know why we were so happy about being able to do the change. So first, Perl, right? Actually, our company started in the 90s, so we had Perl. And you can hold your applause to the end, by the way. So we had Oracle. All right, that's always fun. Services, sometimes. And if you think about it, isn't a database really a service anyway? So we had, of course, lovingly handcrafted servers that would take a month to get into our data centers. What they call organically grown CSS, so very natural and evolutionary, right? We had custom JavaScript and jQuery for everything you can imagine, for serving ads to, front-end MVC frameworks. And with all that stuff, releasing twice a day. And even though we're releasing twice a day, we weren't actually testing. And we weren't doing TDD, certainly, and we didn't have good test coverage at all, and we had a person queuing it as it went out manually. So that's where we were coming from. But then we got to pick our new toys. So we went with Node.js for our web server, Postgres RDS for our main database. For all of our microservices, we went with Node.js and Java Play. For setting up servers and entire stacks, we use CloudFormation with EC2 and auto-scaling. We basically took a fork of Bootstrap 3 with less and used it as our CSS library. And we use AngularJS for all of our JavaScript on the client side. Again, still releasing 2 or more times a day now, but with CI and CD built in, and of course using TDD at every layer, including infrastructure, which I thought was pretty cool. So we were excited, right? We had our new toys. The whole purpose of the project was to reduce technical debt. So we were starting over, so we at least started with no technical debt, right? So that was easy. Now the second part of the project was to make things faster. So we had our new toys, and we needed to figure out, did we actually succeed? We built a page to release into production, and we did some testing on it. And this is what we found. So you can see that the initial content is there something like 3 times as fast. AdSense takes about the same amount of time. And then the display ads the time was shortened as well. So the entire time for everything for the page obviously was shortened by quite a bit. Now the really exciting part that we were looking at was this part here. So this gray arrow here is pointing to where all of the content of the page, not the ads, but all of the content of the page was available. And so it went from 3 seconds to down to half of a second where all of the content that the user would want was there. It's 2.5 seconds faster. We were really excited about that, right? So we were pumped. We were ready to put it into production. Of course, we come from a testing background. We test everything. So we, of course, want to test this. So we took that one page, the page that got most of our traffic, rebuilt it to be faster, tested internally that it was faster, then we wanted to release it to the public to see what happened. It was going to be faster and make more money, of course, but it turned out that it didn't make more money. It's actually 17% less ad revenue is what we got out of it. So, of course, I cursed the name of Steve Souders and said, you told me it would be faster is better and faster would make more money, and I've heard these stories for years, and there's white papers on it, and there's everything else in the industry that says faster is better. What happened, right? And so after we took a few deep breaths, settled down a little bit, we went to the phase that I like to call the WTF, test, and repeat phase. So what were we testing? So this is the page that we were concerned with at the time. So it's a site that's has many parts to it, but a big portion of it is the small business directory. And so this is the profile. This is the thing that gets most of the traffic. And so the edge node, if you think about like a browse structure, it gets most of the traffic, and therefore ad revenue sort of correlates with that a little bit. So that was the thing that we wanted to build the platform to support the most. We wanted to make sure that we got that right. So we started with it. That was also the most sensitive to change when you come to, because the ads were so hyper-optimized. And we're actually focused in on these two text units here, because that's where that 17% drop actually came from, is those two units. So there are lots of things that we tested along the way, but before we even got into testing, the subsequent tests, we were able to take a look at what went wrong the first time around. So this is one of those things that was just a mistake that we didn't catch up front. So when we look about ad targeting for those two units there, so we have basically 3 services that have to work in tandem to make that ad as targeted as possible. All right, so we have a user that's saying, hey, I want to know about AJ's towing. So it makes a request to the web server. The web server pulls down information from 2 services, about company and the user, right? Then it hands that information off to the ad targeting service, and it responds with the best targeting for that user. And then together we can return the content and the relevant targeting for the ads back to the user. Now to keep that user happy, we decided that the ad targeting call is not quite as important as the rest, right? Like if your ads aren't perfectly targeted to you, you're not going to complain. So we said, let's put a really low timeout on that request so that they're not waiting around for that, because it's sort of the last thing in the chain anyway. We don't want to wait very long for that. So it has to work really fast, and if it doesn't, we need to fail quickly. Now what we found out after digging in was that it was actually timing out 30% of the time. So we were still getting the pages to people quickly, which was our goal, so we hit that goal. But that service wasn't responding quick enough. So, and 30% of the time. So that accounted for about a 5% gain. So all we did was adjust the auto-scaling group for those services, and 5% back. So we're on a good start already. We didn't have to run any more tests, and we already gained back 5 of that percent. So we're feeling pretty good. We feel like we're making progress. So then we went to that testing phase, right? So this is one of the tests that we ran to look at the sort of design of the page. And it was on the theme of trying to make things look more like the old site. So for the most part, they look the same, but there are minor differences in spacing and stuff just to normalize some things and not make it so quirky as it used to be. So we were trying to make things kind of go backwards toward the old thing a little bit so we can tell what had gone wrong between the two. So this is version A, right? And this is version B. I'll show that to you again. So version A and B. So do you like A better? B better? No? Yeah, so you can see that 1 pixel difference at the bottom there where the content is moving up and down, right? It's actually 1 pixel. Does anyone want to guess what that may have done? It was up. B was up, but by how much? Do you guess? Anybody? Okay, nobody. So it was actually a 5% change from a pixel. So how do we figure out, how do we decide to try that? Yeah. Yeah, so so he's asking, why the heck would you change that, right? And so the 2 reasons. One was we'd done it in the past. I mean, the way that we got those ads to be so optimized on the old platform was we ran tons and tons of tests on targeting, of course, but also colors and spacing, and we'd see these kinds of changes when we did that in the past. We're going up by 1 or 2 or 3 pixels, and it would be that drastic.
What's the error bar on that?
Well,
5% is going to be on a particular sample.
yeah.
How big's the error margin?
How big is the error margin? So we were running, so when we ran these tests, we were looking at 95% confidence intervals at least, and usually higher. and basically we had a lot of traffic thrown at it, so we were able to get significance pretty quickly. So you could argue that 5% is, maybe it's really 2%, right? But nonetheless, it was up. So that's the important thing, is that small changes like that can make real impacts, and we saw that there. So again, it's one of those frustrating things. It's like, well, I didn't actually fix anything or do anything, but now we're making more money. But also, it's more money. So any other questions before we go on? So, and the second, I should follow up. So the second thing I was going to say about why we tried that is, so we've seen it in the past, and again, looking at the 2 pages together, we saw that there was that 1 pixel difference, so we tried to make them match, and that was another reason why we picked that spacing. So this is a different sort of test. So this is more of a functionality, user experience type test. So again, on the same theme of, well, let's make things match the old stuff so that we can tell what's wrong, like what's different between the two. We had our version A, which is what we launched with first on the new platform, right? And what we did was you'd request the page, you immediately get all of the content, right? And then you get the ads showing up as they're available, right? That seems like the perfect user experience. It's exactly what you want. And so we're excited about that when we launched it. It turned out it didn't work out that great. So we said, well, let's go back to what the old platform is doing to see what it does for us. So, sorry, is there a question? No? Okay, sorry. All right, so then version B was to say, let's make it look like the old stuff again. So when you request the page, you get this much content. You wait around for, turned out, 1.5 seconds for the next ad to show up and a little more content to show. Wait another 1.5 seconds for the rest of the content to show up, or for the rest of the next ad to show up, and then the rest of the content will show. So clearly, as a user, you'd probably prefer you get everything you need and the ads show up as they're ready. But version B was, let's make them wait for the ads. And the only reason we did this, again, was because this is the way it was on the old platform. We were hoping to get away from that, but we were trying to test if we could. So this one, well, I'm not even going to tell you the difference there because it was sad. So it turns out that by waiting, basically giving them the content right away, then they can bounce, they can do other things, they can actually explore your content, but they're not waiting around for the ads, and the ads were particularly slow in this case, so we had to deal with that. So I'm going to pause and take a drink while you enjoy this comic based on a true story. So this actually happened. The last part was just in my mind, but it actually happened. And I mean, why do we care about whether it's a second slower or not if it's making more money? I don't know. It's just baked into my DNA, right? Like, I think you guys understand that. It's like, it's not better. It's worse. Why would you? It's worse, but it makes more money. It's so frustrating. We all spend our time trying to make the internet better. And this sort of stuff happens to us every once in a while. So I want to go back and just reiterate what I was saying earlier about when the content was there. So with that test, what we were saying is the arrow to the left, right, is where all the content was before on version A that you just saw. Now with version B, what we did was we slid that arrow back up to where the arrow on the right is, right, but on the new platform. So it actually only slid over to the 2-second mark, not all the way over to the 3-second mark, but still it was at the end of the content, or the ad rendering. So the frustrating thing there is that if you took a stopwatch and said they request the page, they get the ads, clearly the new platform was giving them the ads sooner, but the delay between content and ad was the thing that we were not accounting for. Right? So you probably all heard that there's triumph at the end of this. So you need to ask, this is a kind of crappy story, Eddie. When do you get into the good part? You just made stuff slower. That's not cool. So we'll get to that. We'll get there. But first, even with that slow thing in place, where we were slowing down the page, if you look back over the time that we were releasing these pages, so remember I said this test was a single page, or a single template version. So this is showing where we started to release different sections of the site on the new platform. And you can see here's our first one where it got less spiky and came down a little bit more. Here we released a few more pages, it went down again, flattened out a little bit more, and again here, and it continued on that way. So this is looking at actual users' average page download time on our site. And despite that frustrating, delayed content thing, they were still getting things much faster than they ever had in the past. So we felt good about that at least. So next I'm going to segue into measuring, and especially measuring across platforms. So one of our challenges was we were trying to measure how, our A/B test was old stuff with old tracking and everything else versus new stuff with new tracking, right? The new stuff, clearly we knew exactly how it worked and it was well tested and it wasn't spaghetti code. The old stuff was not the case, right? So how do you actually account for those differences? And you sort of have to work that in. I don't have a great answer, but I'll get to it a little bit more at the end. But really, it's just be aware. It's hard to measure, especially when you're measuring across different platforms, and probably even more so when you're measuring it across a single page inside of the old experience, right? So the other thing to keep in mind is that pages with different performance characteristics will have different capabilities of measuring at different levels of accuracy, right? So if you're, so what we saw is that in our new stuff, we were sort of, even though we assumed we were splitting the traffic evenly between the two platforms, we saw that the new stuff would actually capture more users, right? It would record more users. And at first we were thinking, well, there must be something wrong with the way that we're splitting the traffic. But after looking back at it more thoroughly, it turns out that we were not really splitting it wrong. It's just that we were recording more people on the new stuff because it was faster and able to capture those people that would have landed there and bounced right away without even being recorded. So again, keep that in mind as you're looking at two systems. They can both report on the information they're trying to gather at different intervals and different accuracies. So one of the things that I actually found most, this is the thing that I'm most excited about. It's the thing that I haven't thoroughly tested, but I think there's something to this, and I think someone could run with it and figure out some pretty cool things. So for lack of a better term, I'm calling it latency tolerance. And I know that latency tolerance is a thing within in computing, but what I mean is latency tolerance of the user. And so what I mean by that is that the first page sets the user's expectation of speed. And so any page slower than that is going to seem broken. Right? So if you think back to our experiment again, we were trying to test this new fast page inside of the old normal slow ecosystem, slow environment, right? And so this was the most highly trafficked page and the place that most people landed. So they would come into this, super fast page, and they would go, oh, this is cool, this is a fast site. Try and do a search, not so fast. Something must be wrong, I'll back out, right? And so, so if you think about the implications of that, what I think it means is that a slow but consistent experience is going to be better than an inconsistently fast experience. Right? So when you're telling them when you first land there that this is a fast site, that's what they expect every page after that and every interaction after that. Anything that stutters or seems slower than that first interaction is going to feel broken to them within the context of your site. Right? So let's go into context. So again, sort of playing on this last thing. So because there's a latency tolerance of people that gets built up for your site and the expectation gets set for your site, the context is going to mean a lot. And so again, for the context for us was it's a thing inside of it's a fast thing inside of an old slow thing, an old slow experience. So what we've found is that testing in that partial state is not going to yield the same results as testing in the final state. So as we did the test the first time through with just that single page, the outcomes of those tests were different, actually, than what we saw after we finished the migration and went back and tested some of those assumptions again. So my take-home for you there is, it may not work out at first if it's not the right context, right? So don't get discouraged when you're not seeing what you think you should be seeing. It could just be that you're testing this sort of incomplete process. So now you're probably asking, is faster actually better? So were we able to overcome any of those things that we did to sort of slow down the new faster page that we did before? And I would tell you, yes, it is faster. Faster is better. Like I said, so after we got past the incomplete state, so after we finished migrating everything, and everything was in this new standardized and fast environment, we were able to retest some of those things. So we were able to do things that would just sped things up even more after we launched, and we saw that those would give us 5, 8, 10% gains by some of the things that we did to speed those pages up even more. And then also, the happy part is, just recently, we were finally able to retest the blocking ads thing. And it turns out that in the new environment, with the new expectations, right, we were able to get a 5% lift from going back to the async version of the ads. So again, context is everything. So if I look back at what we experienced during those times, and think about what I would have done differently, what I think you should consider doing differently if you come across this. The number one thing that I think I learned through this process was that I wouldn't degrade right away. I would sort of understand the new system and optimize from there. So like I said, early on, we sort of made the decision that we wanted to start essentially degrading this new nice thing to act more like the old so that we can understand what was going on between the two systems. But I think now that we know that we are able to make other improvements on the new platform more recently, looking back, it seems like maybe we should have tried to understand how the new stuff acted better and actually improve on it as opposed to going back to the old way and sort of optimizing from there. So, and again, once the migration is done, so once you're out of that impartial state, go back and retest those assumptions again, because they may not work out the same way. So don't wait to improve speed even more. Like I said, so we were forced into doing speed improvements for the recent Mobilegeddon thing that everybody was excited about. So we had the engineers thought it was an opportunity, and everybody else thought it was scary. But we finally yes, we get to do some speed stuff. And we did, and again, we saw 8% lifts from doing those sort of things. So I would do those sooner, because really we were losing out on that 8% for the last year because we weren't ready to get back into it. And then again, I would have more faith in our testing. And so one thing we're lucky about is that we have a lot of traffic. So that helps with some of the statistical significance stuff. But more so than that, it was the one mistake that we made was assuming that the traffic splitting wasn't working out right. And so, and I said before, the old stuff was measuring sort of less users, right? We weren't capturing some of those people that were bouncing necessarily, but the new stuff was. And so when we were looking at that 17% drop, it was actually 17% drop in revenue per user, not total revenue, right? So the total revenue loss was less than that. So we're sort of artificially inflating the loss there and putting ourselves in the hole even more than we should have been, because we were able to capture those people, but they weren't clicking, right? And so we sort of normalized for users, revenue per users, and it ended up hurting us a little bit more. So, in summary, there are no stupid tests. I mean, do them wisely, but a pixel can make a difference. So if you think there's a reason to test it, then test it. Don't leave your ads in the dust, right? So you saw that we made the pages a lot faster. We made the ads a little bit faster, but not quite as fast as the ads. And it ended up hurting us early on. Keep in mind the context of your tests, especially when testing across platforms like that. And think about consistency as well as speed. So going back to that latency tolerance thing. Right? If you have a consistent experience, so as you're building fast things, make sure that you're making things consistently fast, not fast and slow and choppy. And lastly, yes, faster can be better. You just have to be cognitive of the kind of speed improvements that you're making. So I guess Steve was right after all. So I don't know if how many of you have spoken before. If you haven't, you should. It's really hard, but awesome. So the after-talk talk, the hardest thing for me for speaking is actually to condense what I want to say down to the 40 minutes or 30 minutes or 15, right? And so I have all these things floating around my head. If you care to talk more about this talk today, more details on anything that we talked about, come see me. If you're interested in any of these other things, I'd also be happy to talk. All right, so I'm going to pause there for questions, and I have one more thing after this that we can go over, but I wanted to pause for questions if anybody had questions. Okay, we'll go with you first. Yeah.
So I actually worked in a really similar, highly trafficked directory, so this is deja vu.
Yeah.
And we went through a lot of the same stuff. The thing I'm curious about is if you guys kind of tracked any other changes besides revenue. One of the things that we found is that through some tests, revenue might be down a little bit, but there might be more people like editing their listing or doing other things that were also beneficial. Did you experience that at all?
Yeah. So the question was, she was saying that she also works on a highly trafficked directory and she had similar experiences. Did other metrics change for the better or worse along with, so you might see an AdSense drop or an ad drop in general, revenue drop, but did you see other things go up, right? And so yes, we did. So it's a little bit tricky at first. So the bizarre thing that we saw when we were looking at it was we were expecting, oh, it's faster, maybe we'll get more pages per visit for like one metric that we looked at. As we measured it, we didn't. I still believe that we actually did. But like I said, we were sort of capturing more of the people who would have landed, gotten the phone number, and bounced before they even got tracked. Right? And so we were sort of hurting ourselves by tracking those people that would have bounced anyway. So it's a little bit misleading when you look at some of the numbers sometimes, so be careful with that. But yeah, so we have certainly done experiments since then where we played with speed in different ways or even UI in different ways, and you certainly see drops. So for example, we ran a test that we saw a 40% decrease in bounce rate, but also a 15%, so it's 40% better if you bounce rate. But we also saw a 15% drop in revenue. So you're certainly playing with all those metrics all the time when you're doing these sort of tests. Yes. Go ahead.
My question is mostly on the cognitive side. So there is a cognitive science in design. Was that looked at where a human mind would probably capture complex information on a page at a particular time or at a particular duration? Did you only track looking at the revenues, the clicks, or did you also look in the basic design part? Is there something different in the design that could have increased the revenues, the more cognitive side or the more design part of it?
Right. So not that deeply, and I say that because the look and for the most part, the look and the experience of the old stuff versus the new, we sort of made the decision to make them the same for the most part. Like I said, we sort of cleaned up some spacing and tried to make the ads faster and stuff like that. But as far as the design, the layout of the pages, the content that we showed them, all that stuff was the same between the two platforms. And so we didn't dive into that too much, although I think it does come into play a little bit when we talk about how do people interact to ads showing up later. Or in fact, we ran one test that was to, so if you remember the page, there's sort of the content and some text ads and some big display ads. And one of the things that we tested, because we sped up the display ads by more than we sped up the AdSense, we were playing with the idea of, so how do these things interact, right? And so one of the tests that we ran was to say, the display ads are faster than they were before, let's slow them down. Like, let's keep the content the same and keep it speedy. Let's slow down the display ads and see if we can delay that from showing up and being a distraction. and with that test, we did show that there was sort of a sweet spot of, and I can't remember the number, but there was some number of 50, 100 milliseconds that we were able to delay the display ads and increase the ads revenue from the other slots or increase engagement in other different ways. So I think there's a lot to think about there. Like I said, we didn't do a lot of it, but it's a very good point. Yeah. Any more questions? No? All right. So we have a few minutes left. So I do have something hopefully fun at the end of this. So I described sort of the page and the targeting earlier on. And the way that we found that first, the ad targeting thing that was timing out 30% of the time, we actually didn't find it in the logs like we should have. I mean, it was there, but we just didn't look there. So that was one big mistake that we made. But where we actually found it was when we added extra instrumentation around the AdSense display so that we can know what we're sort of saying the page is about, so what the targeting was for the page, as well as what people are clicking on and that sort of thing, and what ads are being delivered. So we added that stuff, and at the same time, we turned on the demographics data inside of Google Analytics. So it was kind of fun to, at that time, sort of put them together and see what you got. So it was fun to see what happened. So there are 3 questions. If you want to raise your hand and shout out an answer, I'd be happy to buy you lunch if you get it right. So the first one is job openings. So there's ads about job openings, right? And so they were showed to both men and women. But the click-through rate on them from between men and women is different. So does anyone want to take a guess at if it was A, B, C, or D? Yeah, men compared to women. Anyway, okay, we got one over here. B? Sorry? D? Okay. Nope. Anybody else? How about this guy here? C, is that what you said? Nope. Still wrong.
A as an apple.
Sorry?
A.
A? All right, he's got it. We've got a winner here. All right, A. So clearly that shows that women are harder workers than men, right? So buying electronic components shown to men the same as women, twice as often, 3 times as often, or only shown to men? Anybody? Go ahead. D? Yeah. Only. Isn't that amazing? Like, not one woman. Like, it was shown thousands of times and not to one woman, which proves that electronic companies are sexist, right? So my favorite one. Yeah, so you might know the answer to this one. So maps and directions are clicked by men. Anyone? Yeah. All right, I guess I have to take you all to lunch now. Shit. All right, yes. Anyway, so that's my talk. Thanks for coming on Friday when, it's the last day. Glad you came. If you have any questions for me, you can come up afterwards, and I'll be around through tomorrow, so let me know. And if you actually do want to take me up on that lunch, come see me. Thank you.